Hello friends, so today I'll be reviewing my old trusted Nikon 17-55 2.8 to the new one, actually not so new one. I have bought this lens 5 times by now. Long story for next time hopefully. This is the Sigma 18-35 1.8. So why those two lenses? Well, first of all, I really don't like to use full frame lenses on crop sensor bodies, as the crop sensors already produce deeper depth of field comparatively if you look at the lenses that are designed for full frame, but these are not. They're designed for crop sensor image circle, and what it does basically is it's not allowing the light that would otherwise spill out outside and hitting the walls in between the sensor and the lens being focused more on the actual sensor. And when you focus more light onto a smaller area, you get the same effect as you get with the speed boosters, basically increase the light input as well as overall improved image quality. And you can't quite get that same result using the full frame lenses, as they're designed for a much larger image circle. But I don't mind using telephoto lenses like the 105 macro, just because the light is coming in at a much straighter trajectory compared to the wide angle lenses where the light is being hit from the much more extreme angles. When it comes to these two lenses, especially the Sigma, it doesn't need no introduction. Every YouTuber and his dog has one by now, at least the filmmaking community folk. It's been maybe a little bit overhyped, but not entirely for no reason. In terms of technical specs, the Sigma is, in my opinion, and a lot of other cinematographers and filmmakers or people on a tighter budget, is definitely one of the best, if not the best, value lens that you can get for the quality that it produces on the market. It has superb build quality and ergonomics, fantastic image quality, and I believe Sigma actually improved the design, at least in my last 5 lenses that I had, the Sigma 18-35s. I can see that this one is the most different. I can't really put my finger on what it is. I would probably need to get some older samples to compare with, but I will try to get in touch with Sigma and find out if there were any design revisions and what are those, because I don't know, it just feels like there was some things changed compared to my previous one. This one definitely feels much better, although I must say I bought this one from retail seller on Amazon, not gray market, which I would normally do. Just because I thought, you know, if I buy it, I don't like it, I can return it. It's much less hassle than dealing with the gray market. It has a constant aperture of 1.8 going throughout the focal range of the 18-35 millimeters, as well as 9 rounded aperture blades that are really nice and round. The bokeh is just superior to even this one. And yes, it's razor sharp at 1.8. Some people might be concerned about the somewhat limited range of focal ranges on the Sigma being from 18-35 millimeters, especially if you compare it to the Nikon, which is 17-55 millimeters. In reality, is it really a problem? I don't think so. Just because if you look back at all the movies that's been produced ever, and the vast majority of them, if you look at the technical specs of what lenses were used and what focal lengths of those lenses were actually end up on the screen in a final cut, they all range between that range of 20 to 30 millimeters. So it's kind of a sweet spot that Sigma, I don't know how, maybe they done their research before making a lens, I would assume so, pretty much nailed it. But Sigma has another secret trick up its sleeve that I will describe in the benefits of either one versus the other a little bit later. Yeah, and I didn't mention even the price. The Sigma is only about $600. If you think about what kind of lenses Sigma actually beats out, a lot of them are actually fixed primes. And if you think about how many fixed primes you get from 18-35, it's crazy value for what you're getting. But before I go too deep into the details of what makes this lens so great, let's talk about Nikon and why am I comparing it against it? And by the end of the video, you will find out which one actually wins out for me. Although, kinda can give you a little bit of a spoiler alert, it's like splitting hairs really. So the Nikon 17-55 2.8 professional lens. I must emphasize that because of its build and its intended use, and more importantly, the price tag. When it came out, it was, I believe, close to $2,000. At least, even now you can sometimes find one that's floating around, new one, I think maybe new old stock or something, or maybe Nikon's still making them, for about $1,500-$1,700, which is crazy if you think about how much they cost now. See, the first time I heard about it was in the good old photography days when the crop sensor was pretty much all there was that's available. And because of the price tag, it was completely out of my reach. I never considered it seriously. And when the full frame became much more mainstream and obtainable, this kind of fell out of its intended usage, because crop became that new type of format for amateur entry-level photographers. Only Canon with their 1D series were doing the crop sensor. Everyone else pretty much moved away in terms of professional level photography. But then I moved to video, and over there, crop or Super 35, which is similar size as a crop, is all that's been ever used. And even to this day, yes, you have the full frame Alexas and full frame DSLR video cameras, but the vast majority of professional cameras that are being used in the market up to this date and still to date are crop sensor cameras. Even the latest Alexa 35, this $70,000-$80,000 camera that's been recently released, that's also crop sensor. Fun fact, if you go look up what most of the movies were shot at in terms of the size of the film or the sensor, they were all Super 35 or crop sensor cameras. Right, so back to this lens. I was watching National Geographic's Behind the Scenes, one of the episodes or whatever, and I saw them lugging these huge red cameras around, and to my surprise, I saw this bad boy attached to one of them. I was like, alright, gotta check them out, they're any good? And to my even bigger surprise, I saw how much they go for on eBay, which was like $200 to $400 for like a mint condition. My mind was completely blown. I was like, how can nearly $2,000 lens cost that little? And like I said before, it just was a very bad timing in terms of the market. So if I had to put, a label of like, that is one of the best value lenses you can get for the quality on the market, this is the best lens in terms of the value, versatility, and image quality that you can get on the market at the moment. So I ordered a couple of them, one from the retailer just to begin to try it, to see how it feels like, and another one later on from eBay for myself to, be using it, because again, my mind was blown by the quality it's been produced. It actually overnight replaced the full set of Zeiss lenses just because it was sharper, brighter, and better color than any of the Zeiss lenses I had. It has one issue, actually a couple of issues that became more and more important for me later on, but overall, that was a total winner at the time, especially when I took it to the trips. Oh my god, that focal range, I didn't need any other lenses. This was all I've ever needed in a traveling package. I could zoom in 55mm, perfection. I can go as wide as 17mm, also fantastic. But I use Blackmagic cameras, and they are EF mount native. And in order to mount Nikon lens to the EF mount, you have to use an adapter. In this case, this is one of the cheaper adapters, because another issue is with these adapters, if you want to get a good quality German made, I will put the name on the screen once I remember what it is, mount, those go for about $150 or so, which is crazy. It's like half the price of the lens for a mount. And you still have an issue of not having the electronic coupling with the camera. And for me, this has become more important now that Blackmagic introduced the gyro stabilization in post, which requires you to have correct metadata for the lenses you're using. You can overcome it, yes. For every time you change the focal length, you can edit the metadata on the camera, but can you do that on the field every time you touch the zoom ring? Not really practical. Plus, you have no way of seeing what aperture setting you're in. You might be shooting at a very maximum aperture, or you might be shooting at somewhere f8 or whatever, Yes, false color helps to, you know, kind of see what you are shooting and whatnot, but ideally you don't want to go past f8 on any of these consumer grade lenses. And for me, it was just one of those big points that made me consider Sigma again. If you are, however, considering one, highly recommend it. But if you can, get a camera that either has an Nikon native mount, but if you're lucky to have one of them big cinema red cameras or Alexas and whatnot who have the interchangeable mount, that should not really be a problem for you. You just unscrew that mount, put the Nikon one on, and then you can use any glass you wish. So in terms of methodology, I used my Blackmagic 6K mounted on a tripod, and I would just swap the lenses and use the same focal range. Most of the shots are done at 20 and 35 millimeters, just because that's the focal ranges that I use the most. But you need to keep in mind that Nikon is able to go 1 millimeter wider, and it can go past 35 all the way to 55 millimeters, which is a huge advantage if you're traveling. It's almost, like I said before, it's splitting hairs. But I'll carry on, I'll explain you what are the points that sway me either way eventually. But even after all that testing, sometimes I would prefer one over the other, simply because the light would move a little bit to, you know, because I was shooting in the evening, so the sun was setting quite fast, and it didn't make me realize that. I knew that before, but it more emphasized the fact that the light is way more important than the lenses. And if I had to pick the hierarchy on what makes up the great image, I'd say number one is the light and color, and followed just by a tiny bit is the camera movement, and only then is the lenses and the cameras. So when you're watching these comparison videos and you know, my reviews and whatnot, bear in mind I am a techno geek. I'm not really, you know, Spielberg yet. These things are important, but you need to know at what step are they important. And in terms of priorities, obviously, if you're talking about the entirety of filmmaking, then yeah, subject matter first, you know, then the light and the sound. Actually, probably subject matter, sound, and then the image. So again, this is fairly low on a hierarchy of importance in terms of filmmaking. And in terms of these two lenses, the probably biggest difference between, like, if we just rounding up to the bare basics, is that this is the f2.8 and the Sigma is 1.8. So the difference is more not bokeh. That's another subject that we're gonna talk about soon, but it's more about how much light is coming in. And I am able to stay in the first bank of the dynamic range of the Blackmagic 6K, where native ISO is 400 up to 1000. And then with this, many times I have to switch over to 1250, which is the second tier. And it's just not as clean, especially if you are shooting at 1250 and you have something really bright. It's like if you're shooting at 400 ISO and super bright day, it's not very advisable because your dynamic range is all at the bottom there. You ideally want to be closer to 1000, but again, hitting that second native ISO is never going to be as good as the first one. So yeah, this didn't allow me to get as clean of an image as the Sigma. One of the very big points that are in the decision making of whether purchasing either one of them. But don't be fooled by the aperture. It doesn't really impact your bokeh as much. If you want like the ultimate bokeh, just get yourself a telephoto lens. In reality, if you look at the movies, the amount of times you see the bokeh that all the photographer geekazoids are chasing, it's very rare. And when it's there, when it's something that's shot, for myself personally, on something like Alexa 65, wide open at 1.3 or whatever, it looks phony. To be honest, it looks like almost somebody pasted in a person from, you know, another picture. And it's something that I have received previously when I used to shoot on Nikon 85 1.4. A lot of people would love it. But there would be some people who don't really have the knowledge of the photography, or maybe don't have taste or whatever, but they had a lot more innocent approach to the image, and they would look at it and they would be like, why do I look like I'm photoshopped in? And it would blow my mind at that time. But as you grow and mature, you realize that, yeah, you don't really look at things and see things at f1.2. That's unnatural, that's not human. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So these are the areas that Sigma wins out over the Nikon. First of all, it is sharper. It can focus a lot closer. Because of the wider aperture, you have cleaner image, regardless of what setup you're using. You're always gonna have cleaner image if you have a wider aperture. When I'm zooming in, let's say I'm now at 55 millimeters, but if I'm zooming out, see how the lens is extruding, protruding, whatever. Sigma does not have that issue, and it is sometimes quite annoying. Sigma has a little bit more neutral colors, which could be perceived as more accurate. Personally, I don't know how I feel about it, but if you're looking for a more pristine, color accurate image, then that's a win for Sigma. Sigma also holds the color and the contrast better in challenging lighting. You will see from some of the samples that I posted that Sigma maybe has a little bit more flaring in certain situations, but it handles ghosting way better than Nikon. Also, Sigma has a better bokeh, which was one of the main ones, if not the main point, why I'm actually swaying towards Sigma more. Nikon has this really ugly, swirly, onion-like type of bokeh balls when you have the fairy lights in the background. And I've seen those actually on like multi-million-dollar budget movies and whatnot, and I'm sure nobody gives a shit. Nobody really understands why or what it's supposed to be or whatnot, but we are all creating based on our own taste. And for myself personally, it is distracting. It is almost as bad as when you see excessive flaring towards the lens. I don't like any of that crap personally. It's fun to play around, whatever, but it pulls me out of the movie or film experience when I see those imperfections of the lens. And lastly, Sigma has the native mount to the cameras that I use, and also electronic coupling, which enables me to do the gyro stabilization as well as looking at the metadata after the fact. And those are the things that are really important to me. Now, when it comes to Nikon, it has some wins up its sleeve as well. It is half the price. And also, it is much more versatile if you think about it. You have from all the way from 17 to 55 millimeters, which is pretty awesome, especially when you're traveling and you don't want to switch lenses. Very handy range of focal lengths to have. It is also weather sealed. It has a little gasket there, which is fantastic if you're using on a native Nikon mount. Kind of pointless if you're using on anything else. But I must say, I took it to Jordan. I was in the desert. There was all kinds of crap flying around. We were in a full blast snowstorm, and it functions perfectly. Not a single thing, and I'd never ever have covered it with anything. That's a testament to Blackmagic 6K pocket camera too, because I was sure I was gonna kill it there. I was also almost kind of maybe hoping it to happen to get something else instead, but hey, it survived, so it lives another day. Also, because of the aperture being at f2.8, you get a little bit better controlled chromatic aberrations, as well as the vignetting. It's much more pronounced on the Sigma compared to the Nikon. Chromatic aberrations, just a tiny bit worse on a Sigma, but it's never been an issue for me. I've just learned to shoot around it and light my subjects in a way that chromatic aberrations would never be an issue. Like for instance now at 1.8. So, which one I'm keeping? If it's not obvious by now, it's the Sigma. I'm not saying that I will never come back to this, but for me the fact that I can have a wider aperture, can focus a lot closer, and have the electronic native coupling with my Blackmagic are big enough selling points to make the switch. But like I said, I might regret it after all. I just really love this lens. It's so beautiful as well. Design-wise, aesthetically, for me, this is superior compared to the Sigma. Sigma is just a little bit too cold and calculated, I guess. So that's all there is to it, really. I don't know where I'm gonna end up in a month's or a week's time, but I'm going on holiday and I'm taking the Sigma with me. This is going on eBay for now. We will see. Maybe I will come back to it, maybe I won't. Time will tell. I almost went the way of getting the Sigma Primes instead of the Sigma Zoom, but I had done my research and apparently this beats out a lot of the Primes. Maybe I should do another video testing them against this. We'll see. Anyway, that's it from me for now. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.